Before I could even make sense of that anonymous message, everything escalated out of nowhere. A brutal storm slammed into Lake Crestwood, 5 inches of rain, trees torn down, complete chaos everywhere. The old cabin roof finally gave in, and by dawn there was a massive hole right above my bedroom. I got to work right away, leaning on the construction skills I picked up during summers in my teens. It was tough, honest labor, and it wasn't the HOA who showed up, it was real neighbors, bringing coffee and sandwiches, lending a hand. This was the kind of community Evelyn had no control over, people helping each other without rules or permission. But Evelyn didn't see a disaster, she saw an opening. Within hours, she took advantage of the confusion and managed to get a vague temporary authorization from the overwhelmed county emergency office, claiming the HOA now had authority over all lakefront properties, even for structural safety decisions. It was a whole new level of overreach, using a natural disaster as cover for a power grab. 3 days into my repairs, I was handed a court summons. The HOA was suing me for violating emergency safety protocols, demanding an injunction to stop my work immediately, and they even submitted a falsified boundary map to the judge. That was a line they couldn't walk back from. That night, my phone rang. It was Bethany Cole, the HOA treasurer, her voice shaky and panicked. "Mr. Riley, I can't live with this. Evelyn and Marcus, they altered the map right before filing the injunction. I saw it happen. She told me they'd photoshopped the boundary line to include my cabin." She was scared, but willing to testify. Evelyn was risking everything, the association's legal standing, for her own commission from a resort deal. It was about winning at any cost. The next morning, Sheriff Donovan showed up again, this time with a court order forcing me to stop all work. Evelyn followed right behind him, smug and satisfied. "I told you you couldn't win, Mr. Riley." I just smiled, reached behind the door, and pulled out a thick folder. "Glad you're here, Sheriff," I said calmly. "I actually need one more witness." Inside were the original boundary documents, Bethany's sworn statement about the falsification, and a detailed record of every incident, photos, logs, and witness accounts. Evelyn's smile vanished. Then I showed him the resort development proposal, with the board's $50,000 commission clearly marked. Within 24 hours, I filed a countersuit against the HOA, Evelyn, and Marcus Kane for harassment, fraud, and abuse of process. On the day of the hearing, the courthouse was packed, everyone from the lake showed up. Marcus Kane walked in confidently with 2 high-priced lawyers, throwing me a smug look. A programmer playing lawyer, he muttered just loud enough to be heard. "This should be entertaining." Judge Alina Watkins, a seasoned jurist with a sharp eye, presided over the case. Marcus opened with their falsified map, but I countered with the original 1995 boundary documents and the relevant Montana property statute. The judge immediately noticed the discrepancy. Marcus tried to shift tactics. Dramatically presenting a document he claimed bore my signature, proving I'd agreed to their rules. But I had already prepared, I presented a forensic handwriting analysis. "Your Honor," I said, "that signature is forged." Then Bethany Cole took the stand. The HOA treasurer testified that she personally witnessed Evelyn and Marcus using software to alter the boundary lines. It was devastating. I followed by presenting the resort development documents, exposing the financial motive. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. The turning point came when Evelyn herself testified. I questioned her calmly, sticking to the facts. After 20 minutes of dodging, she broke. "The HOA is the only place I felt valued after I was fired," she blurted, completely unraveling. "I built it into something powerful, and I'm not going to let 5 stubborn holdouts destroy everything I've worked for. Even if it means breaking the law." I asked quietly. The judge cut in. "I've heard enough." She ruled immediately in my favor, dissolving the injunction and permanently barring the HOA from enforcing rules on non-members. Then she turned to Marcus Kane, her voice cold as stone. "I am referring this matter of document fraud to the district attorney's office. And you, Counselor Reed, should prepare for a very serious discussion with the Bar Association's Ethics Committee. Evelyn stood there, completely stunned, as everything she built collapsed in an instant. Marcus was left with nothing, his career in ruins. But it still wasn't the end. While going through the HOA discovery documents, I uncovered the real hidden weapon, a faded notation on an old map. The entire Lake Crestwood area had been designated as a Crestwood Ecological Heritage Zone back in 1971, long before the HOA even existed. That designation imposed strict limits on development, permanently banning large-scale commercial projects like the resort. This wasn't just a win, it was a total shutdown. The fallout hit hard. Evelyn was voted out, forced to sell her home to cover mounting legal costs, and eventually left town altogether. Marcus Kane was staring down disbarment. The HOA itself had to pay damages. But more importantly, the community changed. Jenna was elected as the new CSA president, running on a platform of transparency and accountability. Neighbors, both inside and outside the HOA, came together to form the Lake Crestwood Preservation Alliance. My blue porch still stands, bold as ever. Even Sheriff Donovan came by off-duty to apologize, admitting he should have questioned Evelyn's authority much earlier. I wrapped up my repairs, and now I'm putting everything I learned to use, writing a comprehensive homeowners' rights handbook to help others stand up against institutional bullies like Evelyn. In the end, it was never about a paint color. It was about taking a stand, protecting something that mattered, and proving that logic and truth can tear down even the most entrenched systems of control. Sometimes, building a real community means being willing to fight for it, even if that fight means facing down the police 5 times and going head-to-head with one very determined former queen. So tell me, have you ever dealt with someone like that in your neighborhood? What's the craziest HOA violation you've ever seen? Where do you think the line is between community standards and outright harassment? Because for me, this whole story really begins with that image burned into my mind, the flash of red and blue lights reflecting off my freshly painted porch. That was the moment everything started. For the 5th time in 3 months, a police cruiser rolled up my gravel driveway, officers stepping out like they were walking into a drug bust. All of it because I chose a paint color they didn't approve of. Across the street stood Evelyn Hawthorne, the self-declared queen of Crestwood Shores, wearing that same smug, victorious expression, convinced she had finally broken me. What she didn't realize, what no one in that perfectly beige, tightly controlled neighborhood understood, was that I wasn't bending. I was about to dismantle her reputation, her authority, and the shady deal she thought no one would ever uncover, in the most satisfying legal takedown this part of Montana had ever seen. People like her, armed with bylaws, expect obedience. But I'm a software architect. When I see a broken system, I don't complain, I either fix it or bring it crashing down. After the pandemic, I needed a reset. Somewhere quiet, with reliable internet and space to breathe. That's how I found a cabin on Lake Crestwood, tucked along the North Shore. It was one of the original builds from the 70s, aged wood, wide windows, and a view of the calmest stretch of water you could imagine. It wasn't flashy, but it felt right the moment I saw it. The closing went quickly, and both my lawyer and the real estate agent confirmed the key detail: my property sat outside the jurisdiction of the Crestwood Shores Association. Total freedom. The first week was exactly what I needed, just the rhythm of code compiling and the distant calls of loons echoing across the lake. But the cabin itself needed work, especially the front porch. So I picked up a few gallons of deep cobalt blue paint. Not subtle, not muted, something bold that stood out against the pine trees. I was halfway up the ladder, humming some old 80s song, when a shadow cut across the deck. Excuse me, but that color has not been approved by the Architectural Review Committee. I nearly lost my balance. Standing below was Evelyn Hawthorne, her silver hair perfectly styled, her linen blouse so crisp it looked like it could snap. Arms crossed, lips tight with disapproval. She introduced herself as the president of the CSA and immediately launched into a speech about approval processes and compliance. I climbed down, trying to keep things civil, and held out my hand. Alex Riley. Nice to meet you, but I think there's been a mistake. My property isn't part of your HOA. I showed her the boundary line on my deed map, clear as day. Her expression didn't drop, it hardened, her polite smile turning thin and brittle. You may technically be outside the boundary, Mr. Riley. Riley, we uphold community standards. She said it like it was law. That blue is garish. It disrupts the harmony we work so hard to maintain. Then she shoved a thick binder into my hands, a 50-page rulebook dictating everything from the exact height of your bird feeder to the approved angle of decorative window shutters. Read it, she ordered, and repaint immediately. I flipped through a few pages, then looked back at her and said, with all due respect, Miss Hawthorne, without membership, these rules are just expensive toilet paper to me. Her eyes tightened, and just like that, the war began. Later that afternoon, my neighbor Jenna Hayes stopped by, a laid-back graphic designer who'd moved in about 6 months before me. So, you've met the Dragon Lady, she said with a knowing eye roll. Jenna lived inside the HOA and got fined constantly, for leaving her recycling bin out too long or using the wrong shade of white light bulbs. She explained that Evelyn saw the 5 non-HOA cabins on the North Shore as a personal insult to her perfectly controlled domain. She wanted those properties, and she'd make life miserable until we gave in. The next morning, the first violation notice was taped to my door, citing unauthorized color selection. I laughed, pinned it to my corkboard, and kept painting. But the notices didn't stop. Improper driveway maintenance. Unauthorized water drainage. Excessive viewing of the lake, yeah, that was actually one of them. By day 5, Sheriff Rick Donovan's cruiser pulled up. Rick was a decent guy, the kind who looked like he was tired of dealing with nonsense like this. Mr. Riley, we received a complaint about unauthorized structural modifications. He stepped inside, glanced at my deed, then at the freshly painted porch, sighed, and shook his head. You're in the clear, Alex. I'll let Mrs. Hawthorne know there's nothing I can do. That evening, Judge Walter Brooks, a retired county judge who'd lived on the lake since 1968, made his way over. He didn't sugarcoat anything. Son, that blue porch isn't just an eyesore to them, it's a financial problem. There's a developer, Meridian Syndicate, looking to buy up the entire lakefront for a resort. The HOA board gets a massive commission if they secure every property, including yours. Just like that, the petty complaint suddenly had a clear and ugly motive, greed. Brooks told me to document everything because Evelyn wouldn't stop, this was just her opening move. He was right. Not long after, a cease and desist letter arrived from the HOA's lawyer, Marcus Kane, threatening serious legal action. That's when the situation stopped being amusing. I started spending my days at the county records office, digging through decades of paperwork. The boundaries were crystal clear. I found records showing how the HOA had pressured previous non-members into selling their land for next to nothing. Then I looked into Evelyn's past. She wasn't just controlling, she'd been fired from a major property management firm years ago for abusive practices. Being HOA president wasn't a role for her, it was a second chance at power. But the real breakthrough came from an older clerk at the records desk. She glanced at my file, gave me a subtle wink, and pointed me toward the Montana Property Independence Statute of 1985. It was a nearly forgotten law, written specifically to stop rural HOAs from doing exactly what Evelyn was attempting. It clearly stated that any HOA trying to enforce aesthetic or usage rules on properties not legally part of the association could face serious penalties. That was it, the silver bullet. I reached out to the other 4 non-HOA property owners, and we met at Brooks's place. We shared our stories and quietly formed an alliance. Within a day, Evelyn escalated things to another level. A full-blown smear campaign hit social media. Daily violation notices started appearing on my mailbox, for things like improper mailbox alignment. And then, like clockwork, Sheriff Donovan showed up again. The fourth visit came after Evelyn filed a complaint accusing me of threatening behavior, right after she and Marcus cornered me on my own property. That was the moment I stopped playing nice. Marcus, dressed in his expensive suit and drowning in cheap cologne, tried to intimidate me with legal threats, talking about draining me financially. I stayed calm, pulled out my phone, and hit record. "Is that a threat, counselor?" I asked. Because I think the Montana Bar Association might have something to say about threatening frivolous lawsuits to enforce illegal rules. Evelyn turned red instantly. Marcus froze. When Sheriff Donovan arrived minutes later, responding to their complaint, I simply played him the video. He watched everything, Evelyn's anger, Marcus's arrogance, the not-so-subtle threats, and his expression changed completely. "This is harassment, Alex," he said. And for the first time, he walked straight across the street and confronted Evelyn on the spot. I couldn't hear every word, but her posture told the whole story, confidence collapsing into shock. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone with authority. That night, I called my dad, and he reminded me of an old fishing trip we took years ago, that feeling of standing your ground for something that matters. I was close to walking away, but he said, "They're getting desperate, son. That means you're winning." Right then, a text popped up from an unknown number. Evelyn falsified the boundary documents after registration. I have proof. County Clerk's Office. 11 a.m. tomorrow. A concerned citizen. That's when it hit me, I wasn't just dealing with a bully anymore. I was dealing with a criminal. And I finally had the last piece of evidence I needed.